Pre-Suasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade, by Robert Cialdini. Introduction. Imagine for a moment you're a consultant. You've just spent an hour in a boardroom, laying out a brilliant, detailed proposal for a new client. You've done your homework, your logic is flawless, and your plan is exactly what they need. You can feel the energy in the room is good. Now, it's time for the final, terrifying moment. You have to state your fee. You've priced it fairly at $75,000, but this is where deals often fall apart. You brace yourself for the inevitable pushback, the haggling, the request to shave off 10 or 15%. But on this particular day, something different happens. Just before you reveal the number, you decide to make a little joke. You smile and say, "Now, as you can tell from this proposal, I'm not going to be able to charge you $1 million for this." The client looks up from the papers, chuckles, and says, "Well, I can agree to that." And then, silence. You state your fee of $75,000. No one flinches. No one negotiates. The meeting ends with a signed contract. This is a true story, and it reveals a secret about influence that is so powerful, it almost feels like magic. What if the most persuasive thing you could say has nothing to do with your actual message? What if the key to getting a yes lies in the single moment before you even make your request? For decades, the world of influence was dominated by one name, Robert Cialdini. His book, Influence, became the Bible for marketers, leaders, and anyone who wanted to understand the hidden forces that guide our decisions. It sold millions of copies and became a timeless classic. For years, everyone wondered what he could possibly do for an encore. The answer is the book we're exploring today, Pre-Suasion. This isn't just a sequel, it's a revelation. Cialdini, after spending years undercover in the training rooms of top salespeople, fundraisers, and recruiters, discovered that the true masters of influence weren't just great persuaders, they were master orchestrators of attention. They understood that what you say first changes how people experience everything you say next. Today, we are going to unpack this revolutionary idea. By the end of our time together, you won't just understand the theory of persuasion, you'll have a roadmap for creating what Cialdini calls privileged moments, brief windows of time where people become uniquely receptive to your message before they've even heard it. This is the art of preparing the soil before you plant the seed, and it's the difference between a good idea that gets ignored and a good idea that changes everything. Book summary. Let's start with a simple, almost deceptive truth that sits at the heart of this entire book. Whatever you draw a person's attention to for that moment becomes important to them. It seems obvious, but the implications are profound. Our minds can really only hold one thing in conscious focus at a time. And in that moment of focus, our brain makes a critical assumption. If I'm paying attention to this, it must matter. Cialdini calls this the principle that what's focal is causal. We don't just see the thing we're focused on as important, we see it as the cause of what happens next. Think back to your own experiences. Have you ever been at a party, feeling a bit awkward, not knowing anyone? I remember my own early days, using something as silly as palm reading just to break the ice. And the strangest thing would happen. I'd take someone's hand, look at a line, and say something incredibly generic like, "I can tell you're a very stubborn person when you believe in something." And almost every time, their eyes would widen in amazement. "That's so true. How did you know?" But then, an hour later, I might say to someone else, "I can see you're actually quite flexible and open to new ideas." And I'd get the same reaction. "Wow, you've nailed it." How could both be true? It wasn't magic. It was persuasion. When I labeled someone stubborn, their mind immediately went on a search mission. It didn't look for all the times they were flexible, it exclusively hunted for memories of being stubborn. It was a biased search down a one-way street I had just opened for them. And because we've all been stubborn at some point, They'd find a memory, then another, and suddenly, my vague statement felt like a deep, personal insight. The opposite happened when I used the word flexible. This is what Cialdini calls a positive test strategy. We look for confirmation, not disconfirmation. We search for the hits, not the misses. And this simple tendency is the first key to persuasion. A skilled communicator doesn't have to change your mind, they just have to change the chute your mind slides down to find an answer. Researchers tested this with a startlingly simple question. They asked one group of people, "Are you unhappy with your social life?" And another group, "Are you happy with your social life?" The people asked if they were unhappy were 375% more likely to declare themselves unhappy. The question itself sent them on a hunt for dissatisfaction, which they inevitably found. This is more than a neat party trick. It's a powerful tool. Imagine you're trying to get people to participate in a market research survey, a notoriously difficult task. One study found that when researchers just walked up and asked for help, only 29% of people agreed. But then they tried a persuasive opener. They first asked a different group of people a simple question: do you consider yourself a helpful person? Think about it. Who says no to that? Almost everyone nodded yes. In that brief, privileged moment, right after they had publicly and privately affirmed their identity as a helpful person, the researchers pounced. Great! Would you be willing to help us with a survey? Now, an incredible 77.3% of people said yes. The request was identical. The survey was identical. The only thing that changed was the moment before the request was made. By preloading the concept of helpfulness into their minds, the researchers made compliance feel like the natural, consistent thing to do. Cialdini took this further. What if you wanted someone to try a new, untested product? Another group of researchers tried to get people to give their email address for a free sample of a new soft drink. When asked directly, only 33% agreed. We're all wary of giving our information to strangers. But with another group, they first asked, do you consider yourself to be adventurous and someone who likes to try new things? Again, almost everyone said yes. And in that moment, when the idea of adventure was focal in their minds, 75.7% of them handed over their email address. They weren't thinking about spam or identity theft anymore. They were thinking about being the adventurous person they had just claimed to be. This is the core of persuasion, the art of directing attention. The factor that guides our decision is often not the most logical or rational one. It's simply the one that has been elevated in our attention at the moment of choice. So if attention is the secret ingredient, what are the things that naturally command it? Cialdini breaks them down into two categories: the attractors and the magnetizers. Attractors are the things that grab our attention instantly. There are three big ones. First, the sexual. It's no surprise that sex sells, but Cialdini adds a crucial nuance. It only works when it's relevant. An ad using a sexy model to sell perfume or form-fitting jeans makes sense. The product is linked to the goal of attraction. But using that same model to sell a kitchen appliance is confusing and often backfires. The message doesn't align with the goal. The pull of sexual stimuli is powerful, but it's not unconditional. It has to fit the context. Second, the threatening. Our brains are hardwired to pay immediate attention to danger. It's a survival mechanism. This is why we can't look away from a car crash, and why news programs lead with stories of crisis and fear. After the 9/11 attacks, thousands of Americans became terrified of flying. They chose to drive long distances instead, even though driving is statistically far more dangerous. It's estimated that in the year following the attacks, an extra 1,600 people died in car accidents as a result. Their attention was so fixated on the vivid, terrifying, but less likely threat of a plane crash that they chose a more dangerous alternative. This is what's known as a dread risk. Fear-based messages can be incredibly persuasive, but there's a catch. If you just scare people, they often go into denial. A heavy smoker who sees a gruesome ad about lung cancer might think, "My grandfather smoked his whole life and lived to be 80. I have good genes." To be effective, a threatening message must be paired with a clear, simple, and accessible solution. That's why the most effective anti-smoking campaigns don't just show you a diseased lung, they put a 1-800-QUIT-NOW number right next to it. They channel the fear you feel into immediate, actionable hope. The third attractor is simply the different. Anything that changes, that breaks a pattern, automatically draws our focus. Cialdini tells a fascinating story about the famous scientist Ivan Pavlov. Everyone knows Pavlov conditioned dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. But what most people don't know is that when he tried to demonstrate his findings to visitors, the experiment often failed. The dogs wouldn't salivate. It took Pavlov a long time to figure out why. The mere presence of a new person in the room, a change in the environment, was such a powerful stimulus that it hijacked the dog's attention, overriding the conditioned response. The dog was thinking, "What's this new thing?" Not "It's time to eat." This is called the orienting response, and it's a fundamental reflex for survival. We are wired to investigate change. So we have the attractors, sex, danger, and change, that grab our focus. But what holds it? Cialdini calls these the magnetizers. The most powerful magnetizer of all is the self-relevant. Nothing is more captivating to us than, well, us. Take a group photo with your friends and watch what happens when you pass the camera around. Every single person will look first, longest, and last at themselves. We are the main characters in our own movie, and information related to us is irresistible. This is why personalized marketing works so well. A message tailored with your name, age, or location is far more likely to be read and remembered. But this also has fascinating implications for everyday interactions. Cialdini shares a personal story about a time he was set to give a speech right after a performance by a world-famous ballet dancer. He was sitting in the front row, yet he completely missed the performance. Why? Because his mind was consumed with what was self-relevant at that moment, his upcoming speech. He was mentally rehearsing his lines, his transitions, his jokes. This is known as the next in-line effect. We have terrible recall for what the person right before us says because we're too busy preparing for our own turn. This leads to a brilliant piece of practical advice for any important meeting. If you want the most influential person in the room to really hear your idea, don't sit right next to them. If you speak right before or right after them, their mind will be a self-focused blur. Instead, sit directly across from them. Your face will be visually prominent, making your ideas more focal and memorable, and you'll be speaking when their mind is clear and receptive. The second magnetizer is the unfinished. Our minds hate open loops. We crave closure. This is called the Zeigarnik effect, named after a psychologist who noticed that a waiter in a busy cafe could remember complex, unpaid orders perfectly, but the moment the bill was paid, he would completely forget what the table had ordered. The unfinished task hoarded his attention. This is why cliffhangers in TV shows are so addictive. It's why you can't stop thinking about that one puzzle you couldn't solve. One study found something truly remarkable. College women were shown photos of attractive men who had supposedly rated their profiles. Who were the women most attracted to? Not the men who gave them the highest ratings. They were most attracted to the men whose ratings were kept a secret. The uncertainty, the unfinished story, made those men occupy their thoughts, and that constant mental attention bred attraction. They can hardly think of anything else, the researchers concluded. Cialdini offers a genius tip for writers, or for anyone who procrastinates on a big project. Never end a work session by completing a paragraph or even a full thought. Stop mid-sentence. He knows exactly what he wants to write next, but he forces himself to stop. Why? Because the gnawing need to finish that sentence, to close that loop, becomes a powerful motivator that pulls him back to his desk the next day, eager to get started. The final magnetizer is a close cousin of the unfinished, the mysterious. While an unfinished task demands that we find out what happens next, a mystery demands an explanation. And the search for an explanation is one of the most engaging mental activities we can undertake. When Cialdini was starting his career, he decided to improve his teaching by beginning every lecture not with a statement, but with a puzzle. For example, he would pose this mystery to his audience: what was the single most effective marketing decision the tobacco industry ever made? Most people guess Joe Camel or the Marlboro Man. But the answer is far stranger. In the late 1960s, after years of declining sales due to anti-smoking campaigns, Big Tobacco did something unbelievable. They went to Congress and lobbied to have all of their own ads banned from television and radio. Why on earth would they do that? It seems like corporate suicide. Cialdini lets the mystery hang in the air. He deepens it by explaining that this move saved them millions in advertising and, almost overnight, sales started climbing again. He then reveals the clue. At the time, a regulation called the Fairness Doctrine required that for every cigarette ad that ran on TV, free airtime had to be given to anti-smoking groups for a counter ad. And these counter ads were devastatingly effective. They were shredding tobacco profits. The tobacco companies realized they couldn't win a head-to-head fight. So, instead of trying to out-advertise the counter ads, they made a brilliant strategic move. By getting all cigarette ads banned from the airwaves, they knew the Fairness Doctrine would no longer apply. The free anti-smoking ads would disappear. And they were right. Once the counter-arguments were gone, sales went up. By framing this lesson as a mystery, Cialdini doesn't just get his audience to listen, he makes them lean in, engage, and crave the answer. A mystery doesn't just ask for our attention, it commands it, making the subsequent explanation far more memorable and impactful. So, we have the commanders of attention. But once we have someone's focus on a concept, like helpfulness, adventure, or a mystery, how does that translate into action? The answer lies in the brain's vast network of associations. Cialdini's mantra here is simple: I link, therefore I think. Our thoughts are not isolated events, they are chains of associations. When you hear the word beach, you might instantly think of sun, sand, and ocean without any conscious effort. The concept of beach has preloaded, or primed, those related concepts, making them more accessible in your mind. This is the engine of persuasion. By bringing a concept to the forefront of someone's mind, you also bring all of its associated concepts closer to the surface. This was beautifully demonstrated in the famous online furniture store study. When visitors landed on a website with a background wallpaper of soft, fluffy clouds, they rated comfort as a more important feature for a sofa. They spent more time clicking on information about cushion softness, and ultimately, they were more likely to choose a more comfortable, and more expensive, sofa. When another group landed on the exact same site, but the wallpaper was covered in pennies, they did the opposite. They rated price as more important, searched for cost information, and preferred the cheaper sofas. The visitors themselves refused to believe the wallpaper had any effect on them. But it did. The image of clouds was associated with softness and comfort, which primed them to value that quality. The image of pennies was associated with money and economy, priming them to value price. The persuader's job is to identify the mental state they want their audience to be in and then find the concepts and images associated with that state. This leads us to one of the book's biggest revelations. What are the most universally persuasive concepts you can prime? Cialdini argues that they are the very same 6 principles from his original book, Influence. But here, they are used not as direct persuasion tactics, but as persuasive openers. Before you ask for a favor, do something to prime reciprocation. Giving a small, unexpected gift makes people feel indebted and more open to your request. Before you try to build consensus, find a way to highlight liking. Pointing out a genuine similarity, even a small one like a shared hometown or favorite sports team, creates a bond and makes your message feel more trustworthy. Before you recommend a course of action, prime social proof. Show that many others, especially similar others, have already made that choice. Before you give your expert opinion, have someone else introduce you or mention your credentials to prime authority. It makes your subsequent words carry much more weight. Before you talk about the benefits of your offer, mention its exclusivity or what could be lost if the opportunity is missed, priming scarcity. And before you ask for a big commitment, get a small yes on something related to it, priming consistency. For years, Cialdini believed these 6 principles were the complete story. But his continued research uncovered a 7th, one he argues might be the most powerful of all: unity. Unity is different from liking. Liking is about being fond of someone. Unity is about feeling that someone is of you. It's about a shared identity, a sense of we. When we feel a sense of unity with someone, their well-being becomes our well-being. Their concerns become our concerns. We help them not because we owe them, but because they are part of us. Cialdini identifies 2 major pathways to creating this feeling of unity. The first is being together. This is most powerfully triggered by kinship, family. We are biologically wired to favor those who share our genes. This is why a parent will do almost anything for their child. But clever communicators can create a sense of kinship even where none exists. They use the language of family, brothers and sisters, motherland, heritage. Warren Buffett, one of the most trusted figures in the financial world, masterfully used this in his 50th anniversary letter to his shareholders. He had to address a difficult question: what would happen to the company after he was gone? To build trust, he framed his entire explanation with one persuasive sentence: "I will tell you what I would say to my family today if they asked me about Berkshire's future." In that moment, he wasn't a CEO talking to investors. He was a father giving advice to his family. The frame transformed the message, making it feel deeply personal and trustworthy. Besides family, another powerful source of unity is a shared place, a common home, neighborhood, or nationality. It creates an instant we. Cialdini tells an incredible story from World War II. Thousands of Jewish refugees had fled to Japanese-controlled Shanghai. When Japan formally allied with Nazi Germany, the Japanese High Command summoned 2 Jewish community leaders, both rabbis, and asked them a terrifying question: why do our allies, the Nazis, hate you so much? The fate of their entire community hung on the answer. One rabbi, a brilliant scholar, was frozen, trying to formulate a complex historical and theological answer. But the other rabbi, an older man known for his deep understanding of human nature, replied with 7 simple words. He looked at the Japanese generals and said calmly, "Because we are Asian, like you." In that one sentence, he reframed the entire dynamic. He created a new we, the people of Asia, and in doing so, he made the Germans the they, the outsiders. The Japanese officers were stunned into silence. They conferred, and then returned to grant safety to the Jewish community. The power of a shared identity, of a shared place, had overridden a military alliance. The second pathway to unity is acting together. When we do things with others, especially in synchrony, we begin to feel a part of them. This is why soldiers marching in step, choirs singing in harmony, and fans chanting in unison feel such a powerful bond. The coordinated action blurs the line between me and we. Studies have shown that even simple synchronized actions, like tapping fingers in time with a stranger, dramatically increase feelings of closeness and the willingness to help that stranger later. Music is a particularly powerful tool for creating synchrony, leading to what Cialdini calls a jingle out there. It bypasses our rational minds and connects with us on a primal, emotional level, making us feel part of something larger. Another form of acting together is co-creation. When you create something with someone, you become partners. Their success is your success. Cialdini offers a brilliant piece of advice here that can transform your relationships at work and at home. If you want to get someone's buy-in on an idea, don't just pitch it to them. Ask for their advice. There is a subtle but profound difference between asking for an opinion and asking for advice. An opinion asks someone to step back and judge. Advice asks them to step forward and partner with you. When you ask for advice, you are inviting them to co-create the solution with you. They become an accomplice. And once they've contributed to the idea, they are far more invested in seeing it succeed. Finally, Cialdini addresses the two big questions that hang over all this knowledge: ethics and endurance. Is this all just a toolkit for manipulation? Cialdini argues forcefully that using these techniques unethically is not just morally wrong, it's a terrible business strategy. He describes what he calls the triple tumor structure of organizational dishonesty. An organization that encourages cheating its customers will inevitably suffer three internal consequences, even if it never gets caught. First, its employees will suffer from moral stress, leading to burnout and poor performance. Second, the most honest and ethical employees will be the first to leave, creating a massive turnover cost. And third, the company will be left with employees who are comfortable with dishonesty. And Cialdini warns, those who cheat for you will eventually cheat against you. The internal rot of dishonesty far outweighs any short-term gains. So how do you make the positive changes created by Pre-Suasion last? Cialdini calls this post-suasion. There are two keys. First, secure a commitment. Once someone has been moved in a certain direction, get them to take an active, public, and voluntary step consistent with that new feeling. If they write it down, tell someone, or invest even a small amount of effort, the change becomes part of their identity and is much more likely to stick. Second, engineer the environment. We can become interior designers of our own lives, placing cues in our surroundings that will automatically trigger the mindsets and behaviors we want. The study of hand washing in hospitals is a perfect example. A sign that read, "Hand hygiene prevents you from catching diseases," had no effect on doctors. But a sign that read, "Hand hygiene prevents patients from catching diseases," increased hand washing by 45%. The second sign persuasively cued the doctor's deep-seated professional identity as healers and protectors, making the right action feel automatic. In the end, Persuasion leaves us with a powerful and hopeful conclusion. Who we are in any given moment is largely a function of where our attention is focused in the moment just before. We can be leaves in the wind, pushed around by accidental cues in our environment, or worse, by the deliberate cues of a manipulative persuader. Or, we can take control. We can become the architects of our own moments, persuading ourselves and others toward better choices, deeper connections, and more meaningful outcomes. The real magic isn't in the message. It's in the moment before. Commentary. When you finish a book like Persuasion, you start to see the world in a different way. You notice the music playing in a store, the background on a website, the first question a salesperson asks you. It's like being given a pair of glasses that reveals the hidden architecture of human interaction. But for me, the most profound and lasting lesson from this book isn't about how to influence others. It's about how to influence yourself. We all have versions of ourselves we want to be: more focused, more creative, healthier, kinder. We set goals and rely on willpower, but often, we fail. Cialdini's work suggests a different, more graceful approach. Instead of fighting against our distracted minds, we can gently guide them. We can become the persuaders of our own lives. This idea of persuasive geographies is incredibly empowering. It means that self-improvement isn't just an internal battle of discipline, it's also an external act of design. You can decide, right now, who you want to be, and then surround yourself with the cues that will automatically prime that identity. If you want to be a writer, you place books and a journal in your line of sight, not a TV remote. If you want to be healthier, you place a bowl of fruit on the counter, not a jar of cookies. You are architecting the moments that will precede your choices. You are making the desired path the path of least resistance. So, how can you start using these powerful ideas today, in a simple, practical way? Here are 3 actions you can take. First, practice the one-question persuasion. Before any important conversation, whether you're asking for a raise, pitching an idea, or even having a difficult talk with a family member, ask yourself this one question: what mindset do I want this person to be in right before I make my point? Do you want them to be feeling cooperative, adventurous, cautious, trusting? Just asking this question forces you to think like a persuader and to focus on preparing the moment, not just the message. Second, engineer your most important geography. Look at the space where you spend the most time working or studying. Your desk, your room. Ask yourself honestly, what is this space persuading me to do right now? Is it priming focus or distraction? Creativity or consumption? Choose one goal that truly matters to you, and then place one single object in your environment that acts as a persuasive cue for that goal. It could be a photo of a role model, a quote that inspires you, or an object that represents a finished project. Make your environment an ally, not an adversary. And third, the next time you need someone's help or support, ask for advice, not an opinion. This is perhaps the most powerful and simple tactic in the entire book. Whether it's a teacher, a boss, or a friend, don't just show them your finished work and ask what they think. Bring them in early and say, "I'm working on something, and I'm a bit stuck. I was hoping I could get your advice." This small shift in language transforms the entire dynamic. It turns a potential critic into a valued collaborator and makes them feel invested in your success. It creates unity, one conversation at a time. We've journeyed through the core of persuasion today, but remember, a map is not the territory. The real power of this book isn't in knowing the ideas, but in feeling them click into place as you read Cialdini's own words and stories. This summary is your invitation. If you felt a spark of curiosity, if a story made you pause and think, then I truly encourage you to pick up the book. Reading it isn't just a lesson in psychology, it's like getting a backstage pass to the mechanics of human connection. The link is right there in the description. And if this deep dive brought you some value, do me a small favor and tap the like button and subscribe. It tells us we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into the books that shape the world's most successful minds. Let's continue this journey of learning together.